Welcome back to FordeeTV. I'm your host, Fordee. So today, guys, we are in After Effects and Photoshop, and we are going to create a comic book intro animation. I have it right here, loaded in VLC, the final output. Let me go ahead and press play and show you what we're going to do. So guys, I hope you like that. Obviously, there's a lot of things you can do. You can change the timing of this, for example. Maybe you don't want it to be 20 seconds. Maybe you want it to be longer. If you like the timing I have, of course, you could always pre-compose everything and retime it in After Effects or your NLE later on, or start with different timing, huh? Keep that in mind as we go forward. Let's jump into Photoshop. All right, so let's get started. I'm inside Photoshop. I have 10 images loaded, and we are going to resize them to fit in a 1080p flick, right? Because our desired output is going to be 1920 by 1080. These images are not that size. I'll press Command N on my keyboard to bring up the creation of a new document. I'll click on over here to Film and Video and select 1080p. Alternatively, you could have said Custom and put 1920 by 1080 at 72 resolution, and yeah. So I'll go ahead and click on Create. Next, I'll come back over here to the first document, which is Paris. I'll press Command A to select everything, Command C to copy, and I'll come over here to the new document. I'll press Command V to paste, and now if we press V on our keyboard, we can move this image around. Maybe we want the bottom of this cafe shown. I don't know. We'll press Command T to bring up the transform. And if we click on one of these corners without holding Shift, it's going to keep the proportions. And we can bring this down to resize it, right? If I press Enter on my keyboard, I've committed that transport. Now we have to decide, is it okay that the top of the Eiffel Tower is cut off? If I press Shift and I drag down, we could bring that back in view. But then the bottom of the cafe is cut off. What matters more here? I think it's cooler to have some of this cafe in the shot, so I'm gonna let the tip be cut off, right? Just the tip. So I'll go ahead and save this out. I'm gonna speed up the rest of this process because you don't have to watch it, but what I'm gonna do is come into each of these images, copy them, drop them in this document, resize them to my needs so they all are 1920 by 1080, right? All right, so we're back inside Photoshop, and we have all of the images basically resized to fit 1080p. The next step is we want to give them that comic look kind of looking effect, right? So on the first image right here, under grease, I'm going to come over to the background layer and press Command J. That's going to create a duplicate. On the background layer, you don't have to do this because it's not like I'm going to come back to this work, but we can say poster edges for the bottom layer and the top layer. We can call this halftone. So on the bottom layer, let's hide the top layer. On the bottom layer, with it selected, come up to Filter, go over to Filter Gallery, make sure you're on the artistic paint or grouping and have poster edges. Leaving the defaults is fine, although of course you can mess with it to come up with a different look, etc. I'll go ahead and press OK, and this is what we've got so far. Now let's make those halftone dots. I'll select the layer above, I'll unhide it by clicking on the eyeball, and then I'll come up to Filter, Pixelate, Color Halftone. The only thing you might want to change here is the max radius, setting that to 6. The rest, I would leave it at such. Of course, you can play with it. I came up with a max radius of 6 because we're working in 1080p. If you were working in 2K or 720p, you may want to adjust the max radius, right? I'll click on OK, boom. That's looking kind of cool. We see all the dots of the halftone pattern, but let's make it cooler by changing the blend mode down to soft light. This is giving us kind of the look that we're going for, right? We're looking for that cartoony or comic book effect. I'll go ahead and press Command S on my keyboard. When I do so, I'm going to switch the format down to JPEG, and then I'm just going to save this over itself by clicking on Save, and then I'll say Replace, and I'll set the quality. Okay, do I want to replace it? I'm going to replace it. I'll replace it with the image quality of 12 of the JPEG options, selecting OK, and boom, we're done with this image. I can press Command W on my keyboard, select Don't Save, and that image is done. I'm going to speed up this next part in post because you don't have to watch me redo the same steps. Okay, so now that we have our halftone patterns, let's jump into After Effects. I have After Effects open over here in the project pane. I could double click. When doing so, it's going to open up my import dialog box. We're going to navigate to where I saved that stuff. If I go to resize and halftone, this is where I saved it. One of the things that I did is I changed the names of the file from 1 to 10, and doing that, then I can select import JPEG sequence, right? When I do so, boom, it's imported them over here. And one of the things you'll notice is, well, we only see a few frames here, right? Or we should be seeing one every frame, right? So that's cool. That's not what we want though. So we're gonna come over here and we're gonna right click on the image sequence and we're gonna select interpret footage, select main, and here under assume frame rate, we're gonna tell this 10 frames per second, right? That means that this animation every second is going to show 10 frames. We have 10 pictures, so every second 10 pictures. And then since we're going to make this 20 seconds long, we're going to have it loop 20 times. I'll select OK, and boom, that's good. Next, over here, we're just going to say this is image sequence comp, just so we have our labeling correct. Next, we're going to come over here to the new composition icon. I'll click on that. We're going to call this comic book intro. Boom, say OK. And just real quick, I think I'm moving too quickly. I didn't check my settings. I'll go back to composition settings, make sure it's set to 1920 by 1080 square pixels. We're using a frame rate of 30 because our output is going to be YouTube. If this was going to be a intro to some kind of movie or some kind of thing that you're working in 24 frames per second, go ahead and set that here, right? Next, we want this thing to be 20 seconds long. So I'm going to change the duration from 10 to 20 and boom. Now over here inside the comic book intro, we're going to see that we have a 20-second long animation, although there's nothing just yet, right? Next, let's go ahead and create a background. Over here in our composition of the comic book intro, we will right click, select new, and then go to solid. Doesn't matter the color, just make sure that it's the size of the comp. You could also click make comp size and it would do so. I'll press enter. Perfect. We're going to scroll back up over here. We are going to type in gradient or start typing in gradient, right? And what we're looking for is gradient ramp. Boom. We're going to drop this on there and we're going to change the colors, right? So first, this first color is going to be the center color. We're going to make this a radial. And because FordeeTV is, I don't know, the color always seems to be green, I'm going to make it a light green for the top one, and on the bottom one, I'll cancel that out. I'll click on the eyedropper and select this, and now I have equal greens. I'll click on the secondary end color and I'll drag this down somewhere dark like that, something to that effect. Next, change it from a linear ramp to a radial, and boom, looking all right, but we need to change where the start of the ramp is, right? So if we drop this down just somewhere about there, so it looks like the circle is the full size of the comp. That looks good. Then we'll change the end ramp value here and we'll extend this out so that we have a larger inner circle, right? That's looking good, right? Let's click back over here on project and let's bring our image sequence and drop it above the solid, right? Next, we want to make sure our modes are seen. You can turn that on and off by clicking on the buttons down here. I'm going to change my mode from normal and we're going to set it to multiply, right? Okay, looking good. Now we're utilizing the color of that ramp below for part of the image. Don't worry, we're gonna make some other changes and bada bing, bada boom. So let's keep going. Next thing that I wanna do is I want to import a title, if you will, right? So I'm gonna go ahead and, you know what? I actually created a title in Photoshop. Of course, we could add text by creating a text layer and so forth, but instead, let me just import it. File, import, file, right? We're going to switch on over here to the correct folder, right? And right here, you'll see I have iloveeurope.psd. I'll press enter. It's going to ask me, do I want to merge everything? Yeah, there's only one layer, so it doesn't matter. I'll say okay. And now I have this I Love Europe over here, the PSD. We're going to close out the composition that it make and make sure we're in the comic book intro composition. Next, I'm going to drag this PSD file, if it lets me, above this. And now you see what we're working with, right? Next, I'm going to open up the transform of the opacity, not the opacity. What am I doing, yo? I'm going to drop this down, make sure I have transform selected. I'll also make sure this is a 3D layer, and I'm going to set this at, what is it? Maybe 500? Something like that, and change the scale to 75. That's for now. We're going to make some changes later because we're going to add a camera. We're going to animate this. Bada bing, bada boom. Anyway, what we want to do over here in our composition is we want to animate a gradient wipe effect so this layer interacts with the image sequence below. So with gradients already partially typed over here, you'll see we have gradient wipe. Here, let's just drag this, drop it on the I Love Europe.psd, right? There's a few things that we're going to want to change. We're going to start this animation at about 4 seconds, right? If you made your animation less than 20 seconds, you're going to play with these numbers, right? Maybe you're not using 4 seconds as the start. Maybe you're using a different number, right? And you can change things once you set them, right? So the first thing that we're going to want to do is bump this up to 100% for a completion. We'll set the softness to 20, and we will change the layer from this to our image sequence layer. Looking good. Then we're going to go forward until about 12 seconds, which is right there, and we are going to set this to 0. First, you know what we needed to do is be over here on the 4-second mark and turn on the animation, or click on the stopwatch over here of transition completion, and then again switch back over here to the 12-second mark. There we go. Come on, you can do it. And then we're going to change it from 100% to 0. Boom. And what's going to happen, you're going to see as I drag through the timeline, is it is using the layers below to interact, right? It's using the halftone layers below to interact. So that's looking mighty fine. All right, the next thing that we want to do is we want to come over here to the image sequence, right? And we want to do some animating here as well, right? So select the image sequence. We'll press T on our keyboard to bring up the opacity, and we want to animate the opacity, right? We're going to go from, let's say, 6 seconds, right? And in the 6-second mark, we'll make sure that the opacity, we'll click on the stopwatch to make sure it's at 100% there. We're going to bring this over to 12 seconds, the same place where we had the end of the other animation, and we are going to change this to let's set it to 2%, huh? This way it's not totally gone. It's kind of there, huh? Next, we are going to come from this portion, and we're going to come up to, I don't know, how about 15 seconds? And we will set it from 2 to 0. Right? Are we at 15 seconds? We are. We'll come over here. We'll drop this to 0. Next, let's select all of these keyframes. Right click, go to keyframe assistant. Wow, lots of big words, right? Anyways, we'll click on easy ease, and that's good. Again, over here in the I Love Europe, we'll press not T. We want to press U, right, to bring up our keyframes. We'll select them, we'll right click, and we'll go to keyframe assistant, and we will say easy ease, right? F9 on your keyboard if you like. Anyways, now that we have set those two things, the next thing that we want to do is, well, let's preview. Let's see what's happening, right? So I'll go ahead and press spacebar. It's creating a RAM preview. This may not be playing in real time, and that's okay, right? You'll notice at about 4 seconds, which we are about to get to, the logo starts to come in, and you're like, hey, logo, how you doing, right? Boom, coming in, looking good, right? So the next thing we probably want to do is bring in a camera, right? That camera is going to add a little je ne sais quoi, if you will, right? So anyways, I'm going to stop it there. You get the gist of what's going on. I'm going to make this image sequence layer a 3D layer, and then you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to press Command D to duplicate it, right? On this other layer, I'm going to press U to bring up the keyframes here, and I'm going to delete these two I'm going to delete the middle keyframe. So now we have 0 right here. If you look in the opacity, and over here, we want to set this to 50%, but we also want to bring it to the beginning of our timeline. I'm going to show you why we're doing this in just 1 second. So now we have an easy ease from 100% down to 0 in over 15 seconds. Next, we're going to change it from multiply. Let's try soft light. that's looking kind of cool. This just brought back some of the colors to this to the image sequence, right? You see, there's just some additional colors. I think that looks pretty cool, and I'm happy with that, right? Now, maybe if you wanted more, you could, of course, change the values here and so forth. Oh, by the way, this should be set at 50% on this particular layer, right? So, boom, there we go. It's easy to forget some of the things that you're doing as you're talking, animating, bada bing, bada boom. Next, let's go ahead and go up to layer, select new, and say camera. We can set this at the default 50 millimeter. It's fine. I'll press enter, then I'll drag it to the top of my layer list, and let's do a few things. We'll click on the arrow right here to open up the transform, and we're probably going to set a few keyframes, right? So at frame 0, we are going to make sure we are at -600 in the Z parameter. That is going to zoom us in on this image, right? Next, we'll click on the stopwatch for position. And you know what? Let's add a little bit of Z rotation, right? So we'll click on this. We'll set it to, I don't know, -30, and boom. Next, we will come out to, how about 12 seconds? Remember, that's where we made other animation keyframes, and it's good to have those things lined up. We'll set this to -2000. Obviously, I played with this before I made the video, and these are the numbers I came up with. I'll set Z to 0, and boom. Now, if we preview what's going on here, I'll press spacebar. We have the camera animating with the Z rotation happening, as well as a push away from the object, if you will, by the animation of the Z property, right? And so again, if I press spacebar to stop, you'll see the numbers. They weren't updating while it's building that RAM preview, but you see what's happening right here is looking cool. Let's go fast forward a little bit to come over here. I'll press the spacebar, and yeah. It's looking mighty fun. It's got that feel of kind of like the intro to a Marvel film. Granted, you did not have to use pictures of Europe. You did not have to use a PSD file. We could have created text inside After Effects and used that instead. It's entirely up to you, right? Go ahead and play with it. Have fun. Again, this right here, white solid, if I rename it, it's type in BG. This is our background. We could go ahead and come to the effect controls, and we can change the colors here. We could swap the colors. We could change them from green to orange to whatever you want, right? It depends on the look and the feel you're going for. The reason I use green is FordeeTV's color usually is green, right? Anyways, guys, I hope you liked this tutorial. You found it helpful. If you did, please share the video with your friends, like, subscribe, save the video. I don't know. Tell someone about it. Anyway, also, if you decide to create this effect, go ahead and leave a link in the comments so we can check it out and give it a thumbs up. Until next time, guys, I'm out.